Hey, what's up? It's me, Lex, back at you with another Pathfinder video. This week we're doing some real play examples of the utility and benefits that spellcasters can provide to your party without even being as much as involved in a combat. We do have a couple of combat examples, I believe, maybe one or two, but most of these are going to be demonstrations of just what you can get away with by having a spellcaster on your team. These are going to be real play examples from my recently finished game. I was a player in Outlaws of Alkenstar. I played Mashri the Wizard, who briefly switched to Mystic towards the middle of the campaign just because we had a player switch and we didn't have any healing, and then switched back over to Necromancer at the end of the campaign just because I love Necromancers. But this advice and examples should apply to basically any sort of caster. As long as you can cast spells, you have access to things that no party would be able to get away with without them. Now, also, obviously, spoilers for Outlaws of Alkenstar. So if you don't want some somewhat out of context spoilers, click off the video now, add it to your watch later, and come back if it interests you, and so forth. But we're going to get right into it here. The first map is going to be the Wailing Scrapyard. And I'm joined here today by, like I said, Mashri, my wizard, and Sweet Pup, his sort of little familiar guy, soulbound doll that features in the adventure. This is an example from early on in the game, and I wanted to demonstrate how even cantrips can have some pretty big impacts in the game here. At this point in the game, you have been chased by the police and collapsed this giant pile of rubble in the way, trapping yourselves in the garbage here, the scrapyard, and climbing up onto this metal can give you tetanus, but you need to operate this crane to move this gigantic box out of the way, because otherwise you'd have to wade through this rust and potentially damage yourself or your items, and then climb a big box. It's not worth it. So normally you'd have to climb up the scrap here carefully to get to this very rusty crane. But right here, early on in the game even, a spellcaster can just cast Telekinetic Hand, or extend, reach spell their telekinetic hand if they have a low-level feat to operate the crane. Now, this might depend on your GM, because normally it would require athletics or engineering lore to be able to work the gears. That was interpreted as the gears sort of being stuck but still requiring some precision, and therefore being able to use Arcana to attempt that check while using a telekinetic hand, because it's magical, kind of like putting more force into it, worked out. And the crane was able to move the crate over here. So that saved the party from having to deal with tetanus. Then we move on to a little bit later in our adventure here. This is Gattleby's house. He's an eccentric alchemist who the party needs to get the help of, and he has trapped his gate here, as well as his pathway. But our party decided to instead pull out a scroll. And this is the other thing with spellcasters, is you can hold a whole bunch of scrolls that can help you with specific situations. If the things don't come up all that often, you don't need to spend your spell slots on them. And so Mashri here was able to pull out a scroll of helpful steps and cast that spell, conjuring a ladder or a staircase right here, so that the party could then simply climb across here and then either up onto the roof here or down here to the front door. Thereby avoiding the traps in the garden and the trap on the gates. Quite effective and very simple. We move on next to the smithy here. This is a little bit later in the adventure, but the party is trying to sort of infiltrate this secret meeting that's going on down here underneath this trap door. Pull the rug. There we go. And so our party found out about this location, did a little bit of a stakeout, and found out that this guy was here and was regularly going up and down like every day because he had a way to go through the trap door. We also noticed through the window, by staying out of sight or invisible, I believe, that he had a particular way he went through the trap door where he didn't set off an alarm. So we managed to bypass the need to do this perception check just by being invisible and watching. As for when we actually got here, Mashri has a particular thing that I opted into because I thought it was fun, which was, I have the feature here somewhere. The feature is here somewhere, but I gave myself a custom effect so that he would only receive 3 hit points per level from his class. It was meant to be that I was playing the classic fragile wizard archetype, and so a lot of my play had to be very guarded. So for example, in this fight here, we had a few guards, I believe, that were up talking with Coriel, and we decided to ambush them to kind of separate them out from the people down below. Illusory object has a range of 500 feet, so I had Mashri go several buildings over on top of a roof and peek over and cast his spells here so that they could then go out into the window with the illusory, or like through the window with the illusory object, as the rest of the party was on the ground engaging in the combat. And despite what you might think, only having 3 people in a combat is not particularly different from having 4 people when one of those people, the one that is missing, is a spellcaster. And so, tossing down that illusory object, we pretended to close all of the doors and the trapdoor here. And we managed to knock out a bunch of the guards. And then we made our way in towards our objective here. So we'll have him unconscious. Now this spell isn't quite fair game because it's uncommon. So it's not the kind of spell that every table will be able to use. But exchange image is what Mashri used in this example. He could have also used replicate. And I believe he actually did use replicate from Secrets of Magic here. But either would work. Allowing him to touch Coriel, who is unconscious, and have him automatically critically fail. Which allowed Mashri to either make a copy with replicate or exchange his look with exchange image. So that then Mashri could go down below and into our next map here, the Gilded Halls, to do some scouting while pretending to be Coriel. And so we managed to discover the full layout in this sort of manner. And Mashri was a very charismatically devoted character. I invested very heavily into diplomacy and deception and charisma with him, so he was able to pass a lot of the checks here. Even when he stumbled into this room and managed to meet Ambrost Mugland, the villain up until this point. He managed to talk his way out of this situation, saying that he was just a bit tired from forging, and went back to exploring a little bit. but that managed to get some very crucial information for planning. And Coriel even managed to kind of split up the party here of enemies by coming back a little bit later and pretending to be panicked and saying that there were some cops upstairs, which brought Sabora and a few of the guards out and up the ladder, where they were then ambushed in the smithy here by our party. And so we were able to once again separate a combat out into easier fights. Something we couldn't have done if we didn't have a wizard that could pretend to be someone else. Now we'll move on to the next example here. This is something where Moshri had to be a little bit closer to the action, and lethality was starting to be a major concern for him at this point because he had 30-something HP, and we were getting into the higher levels, like level 7, level 8. And so in this example here, we were trying to stop a carriage that contained someone we needed to talk to. He was on his way to be executed, and we managed to divert it down an alleyway by tumbling a ton of lumber into the streets. We had a wood kineticist as well. And in that alleyway, we had to use this map because there were no appropriate maps, but both sides of this bridge are actually buildings with peaked roofs. And then the middle here is the alleyway. And then there was like a trash can here that the rest of the party was sitting behind. But Moshri here, not wanting to get involved with the people with guns, peeked his head up over the edge of the bridge, cast a second-rank illusory object, which he manifested as the cobblestones kind of swooping up, curving up into a wave that then kind of solidified as a solid wall of cobblestone, which caused the clockwork horses to sort of rear up and stop. Illusory object at second rank makes it generate normal sounds, smells, and feel right to the touch, which means that these simple creatures were, they didn't want to run into a wall. And even if they had ran into it, they would have felt the wall and stopped. But this stopped the carriage, and then our party was able to assault the carriage and save our friend. Moving on to the next example here. There was a similar carriage we needed to sort of infiltrate and follow back to the carriage hub here because there was some information stored somewhere. So we used some invisibility potions to be able to just hitch a ride on top of one of them. But then once we got in, it was of the utmost importance that we made our way through quickly. We found our way into the information rooms here, and Moshri cast a classic spell that I like to keep on me, even though it is the butt of many jokes. Quicksort is actually a very decent spell. Using Quicksort, Moshri was able to save the party some very important time sorting the objects into more easily look-throughable or stealable piles that we could then grab and go before our invisibility even ran out. We managed to get some very important information in here very rapidly. Next up is the Two Men's Suite. The point of this encounter and map is meant to be that the party gets recognized by security and they have to face a bunch of social challenges because of that. However, something I have not been mentioning is that this entire time, Moshri has been using a masquerade scarf as well as scrolls of illusory disguise to ensure that the entire party has never been seen properly by the foes. And so basically this entire section was able to be skipped by our party because it hinged on the fact that the security would recognize us and take steps to try to stop us from achieving our goals. And they didn't recognize us because we had been very cautious about being recognized. Just another simple thing here of magic making everything so much easier. Moving even a little bit later into the AP in our second to last example here, our whole party was really struggling against this clockwork puppeteer. It's a big, large creature with wires. It does a lot of damage and moves people around. Mashri, seeing the rushing water here through the turbines, got an idea. He ran up and pulled out a scroll of gravitational pull, and he used it. The creature failed its fortitude save and got pulled 10 or 20 feet closer to him, which would have been right here because he used the 2-action version. So it then fell and failed to grab an edge here and was caught by the rushing waters and blended up. So that there is a combat example, but definitely a very effective one. We were very much struggling against that creature. So being able to pull it into the water and get it caught up in just that absolute torrent and blended was very needed at the moment. I am also realizing that I skipped over one of our examples. It was a little bit earlier in the adventure. So I'm going to run back to that one real quick. If I can remember where it is. I cannot remember where it is, so we're just going to go on to our last example here and move on to the very end of the adventure. At this point here, our party is trying to get into this room over here to disarm the final bomb of 3 on this boat so that we can save Alkenstar. Unfortunately, there are people all around because this is a party. They aren't represented by tokens because that would be an obscene number of tokens, but you can imagine just about every chair here is filled and there are people standing about. There's also a large elephant here, standing and dancing and moving about. Mashri and the entire party are currently invisible, just with simple rank 2 invisibility scrolls, which causes them, of course, to be invisible for 10 minutes unless they take a hostile action. So Mashri here wants to create some sort of diversion for the party so that they can sneak inwards through here without making himself visible. So he uses Conceal Spell so that he doesn't have to make any incantations or anything. And he casts from a scroll Quicksort and creates somewhat of a commotion as he pulls all of the cards and cups and plates and things from the 2 tables next to him and from the area all around him, and starts sorting them, spinning them through the air, and then setting them back down on the tables. It creates enough of a commotion that the party can make their way through this door without being spotted. And he gets to roll Arcana for initiative because that actually, opening this door, alerts some folk in here and begins initiative. So that was a few examples from live play. There are a couple others that don't have maps, so I'm just going through them sort of in my mind here, looking at the sheets, because not every encounter has a battle map, of course. But for example here, Fold Metal is a very useful spell for being able to pick something up that's quite large and move it, or to remove something. For example, perhaps there's a door. You could remove the hinges from it and then just pull the whole door off with this spell. It's a lot of fun. There's also shared invisibility, which came up several times during the adventure, where our party was able to simply cast this spell and escape a situation because it was expecting the party to not be able to turn invisible. And Alkenstar, not being the most magically inclined city, does not have the best anti-invisibility measures either. And so our party is able to more or less just walk through areas they would have otherwise had to run or sneak or anything other like that. And then there were also a couple of other shoutouts. Impart Empathy is a spell that lets you use diplomacy to make an impression on any creature that isn't unfriendly or hostile to you. And so this can let you talk to plants and rats, or sorry, just like rats and things like this. You can make simple requests. And when you heighten it, you can talk to plants and fungi at a 4th rank. So you can get information, advice, instructions. They can lead you places. Very important. As for an example that was actually used, Speak with Stones allows you to talk with stone. And there was a part of the adventure where we had heard about a kidnapping that took place in an alleyway very recently. So we were able to go to that alleyway, cast Speak with Stones, and we were able to talk to the rocks that had experienced the kidnapping. They weren't too used to people like stamping and screaming on them, as opposed to simply walking through the alleyway quietly, or things like carriages, stuff like that. And there were even some like fragments of, I believe, obsidian in the walls from some of the bullets that had been fired that we were able to talk to. And that aided us in our investigation. Also, a little bit of a shout out to just some very niche spells that are very effective at various times. Silence is very good for making sure that you can go room by room without the enemies being able to react to you. Because you make no sound and you block off sound in a 10-foot aura, it means that someone yelling for help, it won't reach their party. And finally, revealing light here came in clutch a couple of times because there were creatures that would have been very hard to see or target. And so always having the ability to reveal those as a spellcaster is very, very important. There are tons of other examples of spells and situations where spellcasters can excel, but I wanted to sort of go through my real lived experience as a tabletop player and demonstrate how effective even just existing in the world can be with the ability to cast spells. The point of spells is that you can break what are normally the laws of like physics and reality and things like that, and so you can accomplish tasks and take on goals that a party without a caster could never do. They could never sneak into this place because they don't have invisibility. They could never bypass these traps because they don't have the ability to go 60 feet straight up with helpful steps. They could never track down this person so easily because they can't speak to animals, plants, fungi, and the rocks themselves. You would have to spend more time with quick sorts, without quick sorts, actually searching through everything manually, etc. It's a very wonderful archetype of character in this game, and I think a lot of the enjoyment in it comes from getting as much as you can out of the non-combat parts. You certainly have combat utility. I used the containment spell more than my fair share in the campaign to hold foes in place and disable their ability to interact with the world. But my character also often still had an immense contribution to the party, so much so that I was worried as the only spellcaster in the party that I was overshadowing the other players at times, where we would just run into issue after issue and I would be able to resolve it with a scroll or a spell. They always assured me that it was more than fine. They were very happy, in fact, that we could bypass those challenges that we otherwise would not have been able to. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you like the video. Subscribe if you would like to see more. And I will see you all next week for our next video. See ya. See ya. Shout out to my coffee supporters, donating at the monthly few bucks support tier. We have Phoenix FH, Kizo, Max Magnus 20,019, Streggy, and Taran. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. See you next time.